Welcome back to the Way of the Wandering Wizard. I am, as always, Robert Andrew Meredith Kennedy. I am a pure and open channel for the finest vibrations of divine love and light, made manifest here, in service to Gaia and those who travel with her. Though most folks know me as Bob the Wizard, some Gandor Bob the Wise, many others as the Weirdo in the Kill, and a lot more besides. In my last video, I was having a wizardly wander on a full moon through lockdown, and how, the year of 2020 had affected me both positively and negatively, given me space to write and reflect, brought up a few issues that I was working through. Same as many of us, I suppose. (2021) was, a bit more sensible. There was lockdowns and locks out and all little bits and pieces as the drama at the start of the decade unfolded. That, as I predicted, you turn the lights off, turn the lights back on again, watch where the cockroaches have run and what they've taken with them, became very evident to anybody that's been watching the news streams. As much as I understand that it's human nature exploiting a situation, there was a part of me that still finds, and still is, quite irritated and angry about how, after that, facing the greatest threat we faced since the Second World War, as we were told, and how it's basically played out as a massive bunfest for so many. It's certainly given us time to look at how that's played out, how it's playing out now. But like many, angry with the system, angry for being put through all of that on reflection. Something that was serious for many, but for nowhere near as bad as we were expecting or fearing. And the fact that during that, quite literally, those in authority partied and ignored the rules and made us go through what we went through, of course, irritates me. I don't mind playing any game, as long as the playing field is roughly level and we play by the same rules. Grumps aside, clearly, like everybody, all of those tensions are still part of our life. I was doing well. There was a lot washing out. There was tensions, pressures within the family, teenage children, as I've mentioned. All the pressures of school that we all experience. The pre-run to Christmas, which can certainly add demand to all of our lives. First week in December, I had a phone call from a friend, good family friend, that the good lady had been involved in a car accident. She was fine, she was walking around, she told him to ring me, her phone had run out of battery. Another irritation. Switching off the dinner, shouting at the kids, jumped in the car. As I drove over, she's local, to pick her up from the side of the road. I got caught in the traffic jam. Now, there's vehicles turning, I was toodling along. I was aware, she was alright, I couldn't get in touch with her, there was no answers, I kept phoning. But I knew that her phone was down, hopefully she'd switch on, let me know what was going on. The longer I sat in this queue, it was clear that the road was closed. Vehicles turning, were inching our way forwards, or inching the car forward. Yeah. Lots of people just stop, wind the window down, like we all do. Yeah, road's been shut, mate, I'm turning round. Find another route. No, I didn't say anything, but just carried on. Each vehicle that turned was me getting closer. And as the time ticked on, the rumour mill, the Chinese whispers as to what had actually happened, started to flow back down with people turning. It went from, they've closed the road because of a serious accident, and that was the story for a few cars as they drove past. And then a lady stopped and told me quite clearly that the road had been closed because there'd been a fatal accident. And clearly she didn't know that my missus was involved. I turned round and said to her, I said, my wife is involved in the accident. Are you absolutely certain? Yes, I am, love. Sorry to bring the bearer of bad news, and she drove off. It was at that point that I really started to, as much as the logical part of myself was telling me that everything was fine, there is still a part of me that was going, did they see a ghost? Did they see a spirit? I had a profoundly life-changing experience in 2012. My perception on reality, I said, is similar to yours, but that in an emotive situation, that could have been, that was a possibility for me, even for part of me, even though the sensible driving part of me was going, don't be ridiculous. My mind can run that way since the accident, if I'm not careful. Well, as the long wait, one car at a time, as they turned vehicles in the road, built up, I definitely could start to feel a degree of anxiety building up. The fact that I couldn't get in touch, age-old anxiety of where's my family, where are they, what are they doing, are they all right, knowing that she'd been involved. It was dark, I could see the blue flashing lights in the distance, and having, still sitting in the traffic, there was a lad walking home from work, big unit. I mention this because something like him features in the next chapter. He was a big lad, big working lad, and I just asked him if he'd walked past the accident. Yes, he had, he'd seen it, it looked serious. Were there fatalities? Was an ambulance there? Were there bodies on the floor? He said he hadn't seen anything. He didn't know how bad it was. And while that was reassuring that he hadn't confirmed it was fatal, it still put me back in this dichotomy, she's right, she's not right, as anyone would be. Still desperately phoning, still no response because no battery in her phone. I arrived at the scene. The policeman tried to wave me on. I pointed out that that car was my good lady's, at which point I was asked to park up and get straight out. They'd been taken from the scene to the hospital in an ambulance, was the only information he was prepared to give me. Could I give him details and that he would pass it on to the officers that were involved in the accident or involved in the investigation? And that was all the information he would tell me, quite rightfully doing his job and stonewalling. I tried every trick in the book, I work in the trade, and he just sat there and said, I've just been called to the accident. He had no information. He phoned it through. I suggested that I drove home. Went back home. Obviously I was really by now quite concerned as to what had happened. I phoned the local police station to see if they had any information as police had been involved. All he could report was that they were at the hospital. I'd asked, desperate to know the extent of the injuries. It was important to me to know, having seen the accident, having stood with the blue lights. Again, I'm used to standing in these in scenarios. It's a hugely different thing, as everyone knows, when there's somebody that you care for, someone that you love, that you know has been involved. I said I was reading worst case scenarios, looking at the vehicle, looking at injury mechanisms. This is how my head works. It's useful in my work, but it can be a burden. Eventually, I got a phone call back. Probably shouldn't have done it, but the desk sergeant basically told me that he'd been in touch with the officers. There were no serious injuries. Walking wounded. And it was a matter that I'd be called as and when to pick up the good lady from the hospital. Now, I have to say that certainly was the most reassuring few words that I'd heard. All of those worst case nightmarish visions that were running through my head at times stopped. So, okay. Picked her up, of course she was in shock. Other than that, the accident was one of those things. It certainly brought up a lot for me. I felt that at the scene, even though I'd felt all of this building up, I'd been able to maintain a level of control. Even though I'd felt the little panics coming up, I'd been able to control myself from spiking in and out. That was my personal. As I've mentioned before, the good lady's journey is her business, so I wouldn't share that. That was the first of a trigger, of a feeling that of quite an intense December. My next big, trial or trigger was the incident that I've described in detail in The Body Keeps the Score and role playing. A couple of episodes back, quite a few back now. As a quick refresher, during the course of my work, I'd ended up on the bonnet of a car. Before I'd even realised that my body had reacted, I was on a bonnet, in the same position as I was in an accident. The realisation that suddenly I was not injured and had got up and roared my fury and ordered people around to resolve the situation. So that was two real life and a training event that really brought a lot up, really made me re-look at the accident. As I said, despite those kicks, compared to the pressures of lockdown, there were none of the outbursts. It was fairly level. I was feeling confident. I got ready for Christmas. You know what? Feel a tension in the air. There were an awful lot, if you look back, of astrological readings of big events that were happening over this last few months, 6 months ago. A big shift, another one. 2012, 2020, 2022. I said, we all live in pressured lives. We're all experiencing that. I was sort of expecting pressure and everybody being at home at Christmas again. Maybe it would be a tad tense. I spoke to my clinic, mentioned that we were going through an awful lot, clearing a lot of stuff. Could I have an increase in my medical cannabis prescription, which was duly agreed and dispatched. In part, using cannabis, or working with cannabis, to help moderate my PTSD symptoms, having enough that if it all goes to rats, is there, saves an anxiety. As it transpired, Christmas was wonderful. It was absolutely great. Good lady worked, family Christmas up here. We stayed in touch with the Cornish tribe, and it was not at all what I was expecting. House full of teenagers, we all know what Christmas can be like. It was lovely. I'd entered into January with the New Year's resolution. I had written my story. I had that unfulfilled promise that I'd made to myself that I would have to share my story. That's why I sort of felt that I'd agreed to do it. Was what I thought was important. And for a short while in 2012 I thought it was the mission, until I realised that there are many people who have near-death experiences, profound changes in consciousness, awakenings, whatever you call them. They write books about them. I was just one of many. It took the pressure off of writing the book, but I still felt that I had a story I wanted to tell. Events that I'd been through, things that had worked for me that I wanted to share. I was looking for a way to get that out. I tried to start re-editing the book, which just got back to homework. It was like I've written the story and now I'm trying to edit it. Bits needed to be taken out. It was too wordy to publish. One of those frustrated conversations, and several of the family said, well, you love the sound of your own voice. Well, then just record it. And there again, I hit on an idea. So, my New Year's resolution for 2022 was to start a YouTube channel. While I was thinking about, how I was going to not read my story, but certainly share, at the very least, my accident and how that's changed and affected me, I was sitting round the fire as I often do. Now, at night when I'm thinking through what I'd like to share or talk about or write about, I often watch my fire, in my little fire pit. And the joys of these modern phones is they've got super speed, slow motion, all of these wonderful video tricks. I was just watching the flames licking up, and there was a dragon's head, literally captured the image. I posted it on my Facebook, announcing to the world on the 2nd of January that I was awakened The dragon within had awakened. That shift in energy, all of those little trials and tests that had happened to me in December, all the little outfalls that had happened, had brought me to a point, and I thought, you know what, Bob? You're doing well. I've recorded a couple of little videoettes from the Wizard's Lair, which does sound a little creepy. But I was having fun. It seemed to work. I recorded an introduction, a snippet, and then I basically recorded a 45-minute version of one of these. Wizardly wandering through my accident. All that I experienced physically, and a wandering through into the night. A very early video. It was while talking through that altered state of consciousness while I was on the road, I made mention of being out of body, still in something, but aware of my body and sitting down within a group of souls, with a dear old friend Gary, on one knee looking at what technically was, I don't know, some kind of round map, a map of my life, a map of my lives when I looked in the layers. It was while trying to describe this, I made mention, in closing, that the point at which I chose to come back, I looked at something within that pattern and went, I'll go back, but all that shit needs to get sorted out. Now, I really thought that the next video that I was going to put out would be me describing my life and pretty much the journey that I've now undertaken, now followed on YouTube channel, where I would share aspects of the book from the current position, and I'd just tell you the tale that I told you. A few days after posting those videos, my world quite literally blew apart again. But that will be one for the next little video act, which will be entitled Tick, 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 Kaboom. Thank you for listening. As always, take care, go well, and blessed be.